Alright, hello, Zeteo here. Today we're doing a replay analysis at 1x speed, not our normal speed cast, but today we're doing a review for the Academy that was submitted by a player named Doren, a Polish player, 22 OS. He is saying that his teammate left very early and he kind of just had to deal with it. We're just going to figure out how to deal with that together. Alright, so let's take a look here. We got Doren spawn at the bottom left here. I forget what this map's called. Is it Omega? Yeah, Omega Valley. Now it's this map was made a while ago. Some of the mechs are, I don't know, like really big. Some of the mechs are really small. I think it was something they were more or less experimenting with. Not that that can't happen today, but yeah, it's just like a lot of mechs, and a lot of them are more in the center. So you want to kind of play into that. You want to try to gain control of the center, and that's really hard to do if it's 2v1. Now your ally's still here for now, so at least they're like building stuff for you that you can utilize later on. And you know, really when it comes down to 2v1, it's basically just about like you're kind of playing the same game, but you're trying to cover like all your bases, and you have a little bit more income as an individual compared to them. And so you want to like try to play off the fact that they are two people with two minds that, you know, maybe aren't as succinct and can't like work together as easily, or maybe they do work together really easily and it becomes challenging. So anyways, it looks like you're opening with a vehicle lab here. I haven't seen too much wrong as of yet. You're just kind of adding on your energy. You got your lab going. You got all 3 mexes. I assume you got your 2 solars after your 3rd mex. Or after your 2 solars after the 3rd mex, and then lab, and then more solar. So I'm break it down to units. Generally speaking, you want to start with a constructor and start with your scout, just so that your scout is able to get somewhere faster, sooner. And you can start seeing, like, are they sending scouts your way? And then you gotta, like, deal with it and maybe make some scouts of your own. It can be kind of tricky dealing with scouts very early with a single incisor. It's just because they're slower, they can't really get to the places they need to be to defend. Or maybe your whole idea here is to be aggressive with this incisor, which is kind of fine too. You know, like if you put it into a position like this, for example, this is narrow enough that any scouts that go through will just be eliminated. Like there's not much that the scout player can do if they're trying to move through there. So it can be useful to have defensively, but you know, typically as an opener, you'd want your scouts to be able to see stuff coming so that you can react and make plans accordingly. So anyways, you got your con out, you got your constructor moving forward. Your lab is not, what's it called? It's not being assisted, which is generally a big deal, but because your mexes aren't gigantic and because you went into a lot of solar and you aren't doing wind at all, you don't really have the metal anyways. So it's sort of like you can move your commander forward, but you are going to need some build power soon because your metal is going to start rising. So hopefully this constructor you're building assists the lab, because you're going to need some kind of assistant at some point, especially as you grow your metal income by grabbing these mexes. And you know, you even got this constructor going out grabbing mexes. So okay, so it is going to sit here and defend, it looks like, or assist, which is great. You have your commander moving out. So far so good, actually. It's really not bad. I will mention that even when it's 3 to 12, winds can be nice to have. You just need a lot more of them. They're still going to be, for the most part, a little bit more efficient than solar. Well, 3 to 12, I mean, it's kind of fine. I'm being kind of nitpicky about it, to be honest. It is important that you are moving your commander out to start controlling some of this with your ally, so that's great. And your ally even has some ticks out here looking around, scouting the bases, just seeing what they have. You know, so this is really good to do. You want to do that too. I don't know what happened to your scout, but it must have gotten picked off at some point. Now you can build multiple scouts. That's totally fine too. Incisors are kind of expensive early on, so just sending some in to like just see what your opponent has, like Red's doing, is really nice. Like being able to see like, oh, they went bots, oh, they're Cortex, this is where their commander is, this is what their plan is, can really help. Now if, you know, as a new player, there's probably a lot less to digest. Oh wow, did you guys see that? The thug accidentally shot the constructor. Nice little bit of micro by red, by the way. Just like dodging the shots, killing the mechs. And, you know, this is just a nice little... Some nice little micro that red's doing. But it is a little bit more advanced. Obviously, taking care of your base, getting more resources is overall more important. But if you're able to do both, that is fantastic. So Radiant here doing a pretty nice job of that. And you guys are having your commanders out, pretty early here, gaining control, having some sense of what's going on. You can put a radar up here, by the way, which I would highly recommend. And you should also already have a radar in your base, probably. It just helps tremendously against those early scouts. Now, obviously, you didn't really have to deal with a lot of early scouts, but just as a general sense, like if they sent scouts, you could potentially take a bunch of damage. Like you could lose all these mexes on the side for sure, very easily with the setup that you had, or the start that you had. All right, so you guys see that your opponents already has the middle of the map, which, it's stuff that happens, right? But maybe you guys can push them out. And we also know that the other opponent's green here has gone very, very fast thugs. So, yeah, here's the thugs now, actually. Which means that these are a pretty big investments, and they're slow, which means you can maybe abuse that fact and run around them in some sense. Now, this map isn't really the most open map. You got these walls here that make it very difficult to traverse, especially when your opponent controls the center. So there really isn't that much you can do about that, but it is nice that you're getting over here, degunning those thugs and just eliminating them basically for free. For 500 energy per shot, 600 metal destroyed is pretty good here. And that's actually after losing the LLT that you had here, the guard tower. All right, so blue is raiding on red. Not that this is really much of a concern for our review here, but just to point it out. Here, okay, so yeah, as your metal increases, and especially on this map, because there's a lot of like 2.2s are pretty big mexes. You got these 2.2s around in your base, and then as you go out, there's smaller mexes, but adding up all these larger really the larger 2.2s that are here, putting that all together is kind of a lot of metal, and you need to be able to have enough energy to deal with that. And when you're doing that with pure solar, that can be tricky, but it is a little bit more straightforward than wind, since it's not jumping around all the time. But yeah, at this point, you desperately need some energy. And if you are doing wind and you go into, and you start having a bunch of metal, like it's totally fine to add on a solar, spend that metal on the solar, because it can, in a lot of cases, be more time efficient. And because it doesn't cost energy, when you're out of energy, it can be a little bit slower to build wind turbines. So adding a solar in that case is also fine, just to point that out. But yeah, very important that you add on these solars ASAP, ideally a little bit sooner than you did, but this is fairly reasonable. Like you just don't really want this much metal stored up. You'd rather have that in units, rather have that in infrastructure than just sitting there doing nothing. So let's see, red here maybe feeling some pressure from the blue player here, wants to take out this position. These are really big mexes. 6.5s are nothing. That's not a small amount on this map. So having 4 of those is like a really, really, really big deal. So red really wants to push that out, and I think that's really important and good thing to do. Okay, but you do have green to contend with. It's kind of a problem. So yeah, you guys as a collective are kind of in some trouble because these mexes, and then partly because your metal is so darn high. So now that you have a bunch of energy, like as you have enough metal and energy, you want to add on some more concerts and just start cranking out units. This is very, very risky, because now you don't really have the opportunity to push this with red, and you don't have the opportunity to stop this. You don't really have the units out, and so it is very unsafe.
Commander has fallen.
All right, so you walk forward, take this out. This is a chunk of metal that you're kind of donating to do that. Now, that might have been worth it. Like this allows red to push here. Maybe red can get something done. So it's kind of okay, because then maybe one of you guys can start reclaiming this commander and deny that wreck from them. But either way, it's getting rid of the position is very, very important on this map. So it's kind of okay for that reason. Unfortunately, you didn't get that much of it. There's still plenty of stuff remaining here. So I don't know. Hopefully Red can do something about it. But yeah, so since you're going T2, you're kind of in some trouble now. Now, he is pushing with slower units, and especially with rocket bots, like rocket bots are even slower than thugs, not in terms of movement speed, but in terms of pushing potential. You know, they basically sit there and shell stuff from a distance, ideally. So they, you know, sit there, wait for the missiles to go, they have to wait for the thing to die, and then they can push forward. Whereas thugs are more of an assault unit. They rush forward as well as fast as they can. They're pretty darn slow, but they go forward, you know, take out the LLTs and stuff and keep going. So this can become a threat. It looks like green's going to pivot up here to help blue out instead. So like, you might not lose your base, you might not like seemingly be in that much of a problem, but it is kind of a problem. Is kind of what I'm saying here, because of that. But if you are going to go T2, I guess I should point out some of the things that we can optimize here. So you can reclaim your T1 lab, and you get 100% of that metal back. So you're actually getting 720 metal back from that lab, that vehicle plants. So, you know, generally speaking, you want to reclaim it so you can put that metal into financing your T2 lab and having it a lot sooner, and then you can get out that T2 con. I do not suggest building 2 in this case. You really want to just build as few T2 cons as possible and rely more on T1 cons and nanos to assist it, because these are quite expensive. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was the second T2 con. I totally thought this Tiger was the T2 con. So never mind that. I guess you are only building 1, which is good. One of the things that you can do is, instead of having this T2 vehicle plant. So the T2 vehicle plant, you might be thinking like, okay, T2 units are pretty strong. They can deal with stuff, you know, by themselves, which is kind of true. But you can only afford to build so many of them because they're so much more expensive, right? Now these Tigers are a little bit cheaper than something like a Bull, so it kind of works out okay. But I guess just as a, you know, something that you can do is you can build a metal storage and reclaim your T2 lab. And it's important to build the metal storage because your initial storage isn't going to have enough metal to use all the, or to store all the metal that you get by reclaiming this lab, because this lab it's 2,800 metal. And if, you know, looking at your storage here, you don't even have 2,000. So some of that would go to red. If you didn't have an ally, it would just go out the window and nobody has it. So it is kind of important to do that. But yeah, so going back to that idea is, you reclaim the lab, you have that metal storage, and you just start cranking units. Like, you can rebuild the T1 lab and start cranking out units. And then you just can start, like, you know, just pumping out a lot of units and push back against the things that are threatening you. So that'd be a way to go T2 and have T2 economy being started while also still having the numbers that you can get with T1. And this is something that I think more and more good players are recognizing as a strategy in 1v1. Because having the push potential of mini units, like mini units, you can be everywhere. You can be in more places and defend and attack at all these different locations. And then if they try to go T2, you just kind of gain territory. But for you in this case, like, just to, I guess, bring it back to back to reality with this map in particular, again, it's kind of choked up. And so you don't really, like, it's kind of hard to be everywhere and do all the, like, there's not that many places you need to be. So it is kind of okay, or more okay, I should say, to go into T2 and stick with T2 in this case. Another thing you can do, which would be helpful maybe, you could potentially reclaim the T2 lab in order to finance, whoops, went on Red's view by accident. Let's try to get back to your view. There we go. Okay. You can reclaim the T2 lab to finance T2 infrastructure, such as upgrading these mechs faster. You know, just like having that metal, maybe adding on a couple more concerts, and then just really cranking these upgrades out and cranking out this fusion. You actually don't need this fusion right now, by the way. I would prioritize upgrading this mechs before that fusion. Typically, it's like 3 to 5 mexes before your fusion. It wildly depends on the map. Like, you know, if it's a wind map, you know, you can do wind instead of a fusion, and then maybe later down the line get a fusion. So you can delay it a lot if it's a wind map. But yeah, in this case, like, it is good to have a fusion, because then you can start reclaiming some of these solars that you don't need. Like, you don't really need all these solars. I mean, right now, I mean, you kind of are spending all that money, but some of it has to do with the T2 that you have over here and the bot lab that you have here. So, like, you know, there's a lot more spending than there would be if it was just you alone. And that's really the other part of, like, oh, your teammate left. Now I have to manage, you know, 2 different bases, 2 different things going on. And meanwhile, your opponents are probably sitting there like, okay, we already won. You know, we got 1 guy to quit. You know, what are the chances that this other guy can manage 2 bases and be fine? You know, it's kind of slim. It's really hard to do. So, you know, they might be sitting comfortable and not playing like their best. They might be thinking like, okay, we can get away with more economy. We can just like steer this game into a T3 kind of direction and go from there. So yeah, zoom in, you know, looking at the big picture though of everything that's going on. You know, you've got this that they control. They probably control some of this and some of this as well. And maybe even some of this and this. So it is something you want to push them out of as soon as possible, especially this middle spot because of the 6.5 mexes. Now this spider thing that you're doing is not a bad idea on this map. I mean, you got all this high ground terrain here, and there's so many times that people do not expect there to be like spiders or something going across the map, and they should. But it's just not like something that you see in a normal game, so people don't really think about it. They don't think about that aspect of the terrain. So I just want to say it is really cool that you are thinking about that and, you know, putting something together that has to do with the terrain, gaining that advantage, or finding that advantage and exploiting it. And that's really what a lot of bar is about, is just finding, you know, what is the thing that I should do to gain the most, or to like either do the most damage or get more ahead or whatever. Now you see these bombers. I'm not sure if you like physically saw them, but they are in vision. These should have just bombed you already, but they're just kind of flying around. I think this just has to do with improper scouting, improper bombing technique. But yeah, since you see that, you need to add on some anti-air ASAP. Okay, so you're building anti-air at this point. Let's see, how's your APM doing? 44, that's not too bad, but you do have a lot to manage. But yeah, as soon as you see bombers, put this down immediately. You can even do stuff like pause your labs so that you're pumping more of your economy into that. Now you don't really have that much build power in this area, so it's kind of unfortunate that you can't really just quickly build it. Yeah, building anti-air as much as possible. These are T1 bombers, so potentially you could be instead like having these construction turrets guard or assist this lab and just start cranking out crossbows. And just have like 15 crossbows come out real quick, and then you have a easier time defending. But yeah, now that this is finally done, you're gonna shoo away all the bombers from here. They potentially could go somewhere else. So let's see, do you have anti-air here? You have a couple of SAMs, that's not bad. I mean, I think this is your main priority, right? You're kind of guarding your initial base, your main base that is yours to begin with, because that's where a lot of your build power is. That's where your fusion is, like stuff like that. So that's totally fine too. Looks like the spiders are getting in, and you're doing some stuff in the back, which is great. You know, again, not a lot of players expect this, so this is gonna be some nice damage on blue. Okay, yeah. Fat Boy's a good choice here. Fat Boys are, you know, I mean, pretty reasonable against a lot of things, so like it really is like an okay unit to have in these smaller numbers of units. And especially on this map where it's more closed off and more narrow spaces, where Fat Boy shots can just like hit a nice lob and just destroy a whole bunch of like grading units that could potentially threaten it. Let's see, how do you deal with this? Thugs and, I mean, this is really all just T1 stuff, so your Tigers are just kind of tanking it all, and I guess he decides to run back instead of press in there. But in a way, he could have just destroyed that and come for your base. But I guess you do have another tiger coming out. I don't know. It becomes tricky because, yes, he could potentially press forward with these units and take out like all this stuff. Basically, take out your base. Probably lose all those units, trying to run past the tigers. But you know, I don't really know what kind of situation they're in. I mean, I guess they're just now getting T2 out. They have a couple of mexes upgraded. You know, but yeah. So, I guess yeah. I mean, yeah. I guess I'll just say that you know, after something like that, you might want to consider. You know, what can I put into that location to kind of secure it a little bit better? My first thought comes to a mammoth or something like that. Knowing that you just saw T1. Now, if they had, you know, obviously there's ways to dismantle a mammoth defense, but just as a all-round kind of unit, mammoth can do pretty well against a lot of things. So it's a pretty reasonable choice for that location. See, there's still some bombers going around. One of the things that you can do to deal with that, you know, just to deal with air in general, is to have your own air. If you defend air with static stuff or with ground units, like the ground units are slow, the static stuff can't move, so the bomber can kind of just avoid those things and be elsewhere and attack other positions. Now it's just one bomber, two bombers, like it's really, you know, and they're not even being really used, so it's not a big deal. But just like to talk about like what you do in a you know, bigger setting, or if it was a 1v1 setting, or I mean, I guess what I'm really getting at is if you're up against an opponent that knows what they're doing a little bit more and are using those bombers a bit more, ground anti-air is good for certain locations, but it's hard to do it for everywhere. So you can do something like build an air lab, get some fighters out, defend the area with those.
Commander died.
Looks like one of your termites got all the way over there. Now, termites are kind of a funny unit that not a lot of people like. I think they're a little bit underpowered as well, but I mean, with this mountain here, like, I mean, all-terrain unit is good, no matter what it is. Now these termites can. Oh, he's not here. I was gonna say, Fred's just like chilling and watching. That's like a whole nother thing. But yeah, termites are a reasonable choice in this location, especially, you know, you don't have Armada in this location. You have Armada at the top, so it's kind of like that's what you have for all terrain. Even if they are a little bit weaker, totally fine choice because of the massive mountain in the middle. And yeah, just the players not expecting it as much as they should be on this kind of map. And so you're able to find some good damage with that. Now these are slow as heck, so they're going to take forever to get there. They're finally almost here. And you already showed a termite in this area, so you know, green should know that something's coming. But unfortunately has some very close range type units. So, I mean, these termites can be great against these kinds of units. They're basically like a little bit, they're like a weaker sumo. Like they have a lot of hit points, they're slow as heck, they got short range, you know, and they do okay damage. But because of their short range and slowness, they're not really great against T2. Unless there's something like a Fiends that has such short range and not a lot of hit points, and they can be all right as well. So, I mean, yeah, it's a good choice. But yeah, let's look at your base and your economy. So you're gearing up to build. Okay, so you got an anti-nuke. That's great that you're remembering that. No anti-nuke here, but this is less important than your main base. But yeah, it's good that you're getting this. I would maybe really be pumping units right now, threatening this area. Especially after doing some pretty significant damage to blue, you know, and you're like posturing, maybe be able to threaten this later on. So that's all good too. But really, these 6.5 mexes are just so gigantic. You know, plus the 2.2s in these locations are kind of a big deal. It's great that you pushed this out, and it's great that you did the same thing on the other side. Yeah, okay. This is really cool. So this is what I was going to suggest, is maybe sending a couple of these recluse over here. I when you're doing something like this, I would suggest fight command. Hit F, and you get this pink cursor. So what, in case you don't know, fight command is basically attack until you see something within range, and then stop. And then after it's dead, continue forward until you get to the points that you're setting. So that way your recluse aren't walking within range of these LLTs, they're just taking damage from a distance without walking too far in there and taking extra damage. Now the termite gets in here, you're actually, I guess, just sent one at a time or something. But yeah, either way, this is like a small little thing. You know, like sending one termite in is harder to find than many, so it's kind of like, yeah, that's maybe a good call to just send one, test the waters before you send more in. Or maybe you can, you know, send one down here, the army responds down here, and then you send the rest of it in this way. Okay, it's cool. So you're already thinking tactically like that, so that's great. That's really cool. Let's see, what else can I talk about here? So the fusion, well, okay, I think you meant to like kind of cancel this and then just go for another fusion instead. I think that's a great call as well. This takes a lot of money and gives you a lot at once. Doing fusions lets you get paid back a lot sooner. And it gives you the choice of, do I want to go for another fusion or do I want to go for units? It kind of gives you that opportunity, whereas for an Aphis, it's like once you start it, it's hard to stop. It's hard to say, I want to go back into units, or I want to like instead spend this money on something else. It's already like a lot of money being spent on something that's gonna take a while to like reclaim it if you don't want it anymore, and it becomes this nightmare of like you're kind of like doing it already. It looks like your ally or your opponents just resigned, so you actually just won this game, which is amazing. Looks like you finally got in here and cleared this out with these tigers and sumos. Which I don't really know what was here. I apologize. I kind of missed how you did this, and I kind of missed the fact that you had those units built up. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, tactically, I think you're thinking very well on what to do. You know, and overall, I think you're in the right direction towards like becoming a better bar player. But yeah, fixing, I think, a lot of the early game is really where this replay is at. Of you know, and especially like get rid of these solars. This is like, you know, like it's just one of those things where, you know, you see people like keep their solars, and it's like, okay, this is a chunk of metal that you don't really need to have. Let's see. Okay, so this is 2,550 metal sitting here in solars, and they're only providing 350 energy. So compared to a fusion, you know, that's two fusions worth of metal sitting there, providing a third of the amounts of energy that you'd get with fusion. So anytime that you have solars and you have some excess energy coming in, it's a good idea to just have your concerts, you know, move it over the solar, and then you can just do this. And what that does is it'll reclaim only the solar, only the thing that you are currently hovered over. So if I did it over the advanced metal extractor, I would reclaim only the advanced metal extractors in this area within the circle. So you can do that with solar and just reclaim some of the solar. You don't need to necessarily do it all at once, but like, you know, just to reclaim some of it, turn it into something more efficient, or turn it into units or whatever. And that'll just help you have more metal to work with sooner and do things with, instead of having it sit there making energy that you don't actually need. So things like that can certainly help. This is kind of a lot of T2 labs here. So I will say that it is going to be far more efficient to have more of these concerts instead of the labs. At least currently with this patch, there's potentially some talk to rearrange that a little bit. So I don't know, bar's going in a weird direction. But anyways, if you think about the cost of these labs, so this T2 lab has, it's hard to see because of the overlay. Okay, so this bot lab has 300 build power, right? We see that on this card. I'm pulling this up by holding I, by the way. You can like select stuff and hold I and get a little bit of additional information. You can do that with the build queue as well. Just hold I over something. The tricky thing with that, or at least on my UI, is you got this extra tooltip that's on top of it that makes it annoying to see. Um, but yeah, so this lab here, 300 build power, and you're spending 2,900 metal on it for that build power. Instead of getting 300 build power, you get 200 build power for only 210 metal. So it's far more economically sound to get more concerts than more labs. The only reason why you'd want to get more labs is if your units are like popping out extremely quickly. And when they're coming out that quickly, the time for them, or the time between them building and the next unit building, becomes significant, or a significant chunk of that total time that is being spent on that unit coming out. Now, the reason why that happens, why there is like an in-between time, is because this unit that's being built needs to come out, and then it starts the next unit. In fact, let's unpause so we can just see that with the sumo. And this is something you might already know about, but just to like showcase it. Yeah, so that little bit of time, it had to walk to here before the next one started. So if this got done instantly, if this sumo got done instantly, then, it's like between here and here's kind of a large chunk of time because this thing got done so quickly. But yeah, that'd be the reason to go T2, stuff like that. In terms of like timings for Aphis and fusions, it really depends on what you need at the moment. Like if you if you see a bunch of units from your opponents, or your opponent hasn't attacked in a little while, you kind of maybe want to send a scout out to determine like how big is their force, can they attack me, am I safe, am I not, and then determine like, okay, it's a good time to spend a bunch of money on a fusion, or it's a good time to spend a bunch of money on an Aphis. Just getting that intel helps you make that decision. But yeah, this game can be rather chaotic when you're controlling so much, and your ally leaves, and you know that they have 2 people controlling it, so then they got like double the APM in a way, or whatever. They have 2 people working on something, whereas you're just a single person. So it's harder to manage, especially when you like add in the fact that now you have an extra lab that you didn't have before. Now you have this extra economy that you didn't have before. Like, how do you balance it? And that really just comes down to like pay attention to what your resources are doing, and try to provide what you don't have. Obviously, if your energy's low, build energy. If your metal's low, and there's opportunities to get metal, obviously you want to grab metal. The one that's not obvious is the build power. And you might already know this. I just want to put it out there in case you don't. But if your metal starts rising, you want to pay attention to that, because that means you need more construction turrets, or you need, you basically want to spend it more. You want to spend it faster, have something to either boost what you're doing already, or you can do more things. And I think you had that a little bit earlier on. So, and the other part of that I should mention is, if your metal starts rising and your energy is not in a good place, you want to have more things building energy. And I think you rectified that by building on a bunch of solars at that time. Yeah, just trying to do that a little bit more quickly. And then, that eats up a little bit of your metal, but then also maybe adding on extra con turret to be able to spend it a little bit faster, or whatever. It really depends on the situation. But excuse me. Ideally, you want your metal to be like slowly draining, kind of thing is the ideal spot you want for build power. And then that I should probably mention too that shifts and changes depending on what you're building. This is something that not everyone knows, but the amount of resources drained per build power is not static. So if you have 100 build power and you're building a solar, your resources drain differently than if it was building, say like a T2 factory or something. It's going to drain, I guess I don't really know the numbers off the top of my head, but I guess the whole point is if you're building pawns, your resources drain differently than if you're building thugs or something. It's not like a 1-to-1 ratio with how much build power you have. Like the thug costs more build power per time, or sorry, more resources per amount of time cost that they have. so they will drain resources more quickly than something like a grunts or something. Um, grunts and pawns are a little bit higher on build time. You can see all that information if you hold eye on stuff, by the way, too. That's what the cost here is. The green number, you have the 600 metal, 580 energy, and 660 is the amount of build time required to build an arbiter. And then you sink in, like, say, like, oh, you got the lab that has 300 build power. You have a concert that has another 200. Those two things together is 500 build power. So then you take 6,600 and divide it by 500, and that's how long it'll take to produce that unit, assuming that you have the resources, the resource requirement per second to build it. Anyways, that was kind of a tangent. I went pretty in depth with that, and maybe that's stuff you already know, so I apologize for that. But yeah, I think your mind's in a good spot. Like, thinking about, like, what can I do in this situation, and spiders from this view is pretty obvious, but not a lot of people think about it. So it's great that you decided to attack this location. That's great. Like, there's just a lot of really great things that you did during this match. So well deserved, well played. Anyways, I hope you learned something. Of course, feel free to ask questions. And if you want some clarification, that's all good too. Ask that. Like, ask whatever you want. We'll get back to you. So yeah, thanks for watching.